welcome to the Missoula Art Museum's virtual Art in the Moment. This is an art program for those with dementia and their caregivers. We're glad you're here with us today. This is a recorded segment, so you are welcome to watch it again at your own convenience.
During all education and public programs, MAM reads aloud its land acknowledgement statement in honor of the land that we're standing on. Written in conjunction with tribal leaders, MAM sits on the ancestral territories of the Salish and Pend Oreille peoples, and we respect the indigenous stewards of this land. MAM acknowledges their rich cultures as fundamental to artistic life in Montana and to the work of MAM.
My name is Grissom-Kiely. I'm the curator of education at the Missoula Art Museum, and I'm here with professional artist Bev Glueckert.
Hi, everybody. We are standing in the Linda Frost Gallery of Contemporary American Indian Art at the Missoula Art Museum, where this solo piece exhibition titled "I Think It Goes Like This, Gold" is on display.
We are very excited to have you here with us at the Missoula Art Museum. We are wearing our masks and following the protocol at the Missoula Art Museum and trying to keep everybody safe. I wanted to start by telling you a little bit about artist Nicholas Galanin. Nicholas Galanin is a Tlingit Unanga conceptual artist from Sitka, Alaska. Sitka, pronounced Sheetka, is the Tlingit name for what today is called Baranof Island, renamed by settler colonists. Galanin says, "Our place names have importance and use, and the remaining of them is all actively in line with erasing indigenous histories, indigenous presence, indigenous land, and language." Galanin's art addresses erasure of Native history and language and directly criticizes practices of cultural appropriation, commodification, and consumption, as he suggests the difficulties inherent in reassembling the shattered remains. Galanin learned many of his skills from his father, Dave Galanin, and his uncle, Will Burkhart, using traditional tools that were made and maintained by he and his family. After earning his associative arts degree, Galanin moved to England to pursue a BFA from the London Guildhall University. There, he was asked to hang up his identity at the door and to not use any of his cultural visual language because it was too literal. It was not until his MFA program, Masters of Fine Arts, at Massey University in New Zealand, did Galanin begin to openly explore traditional elements in his art. At that point forward, his art began to receive critical acclaim.
During the next 30 minutes or so, we will share a little bit with you about Nicholas Galanin's one-piece exhibition titled "I Think It Goes Like This, Gold." You will look at the art piece. You will get to watch videos of Nicholas Galanin talking about his art, indigenous culture, concepts, and his process. You'll be able to reflect and to respond. So please have paper and a pencil ready.
What is this exhibition? I think it goes like this, Gold. Nicholas Galanin's work offers perspective rooted in connection to land and contemporary culture. Galanin's works are vessels of knowledge, culture, and technology. They are inherently political and poetic. He chops and splinters the tourist industry replica carvings into pieces, destroying commodification of culture and leaves evidence of the damage. Nicholas Galanin is an important conceptual artist. What does it mean to be a conceptual artist? Conceptual art is art for which the idea or the concept behind the work is more important than the finished art object. When an artist uses a conceptual form of art, it means that all of the planning and decisions are made beforehand, and the execution is a perfunctory affair. Galanin's concepts determine his materials and his processes. I Think It Goes Like This Gold is a classic example of Galanin's conceptual approach to creation that weaves together various cultural statements. The deconstructed totem pole has been covered in a layer of gold leaf, elevating its status from one based in nature and culture to something almost divine. Despite the chaotic dismantling of the original structure, the visuals carved into the wood remain recognizable, though permanently altered. But all is not what it seems. The totem pole that forms the basis of the work was not created by the artist or another Alaskan Native artisan, but instead by the capable hands of an Indonesian carver. While the finished product is technically sound, it lacks any cultural connection. Totem poles remain culturally important in many of the Northwest Coast Native communities, including those in what is now known as Alaska, where Galanin lives. A totem pole has several uses, which include depictions of ancestors, storytelling, clan lineage, and important events. The totem pole used in I Think It Goes Like This Gold does none of those actions and was instead created entirely as a commodity to be sold on the market. Culturally, totem poles created by a Northwest Coast Native carver are never seen as commodities, but instead cultural patrimony. Galanin is keenly interested in this cultural appropriation of something by his community that is then deconstructed of all meaning and wholly westernized through its worth based on monetary value. The dismantling through an axe and inclusion of gold leaf acts as another layer of stripping the pole of its original fraudulence. While still recognizable as to what the original carved sculpture resembled, it is no longer possible to simply mistake it for what the faux totem pole tried to mimic. The work has been fully remade into Galanin's creation and in essence reclaimed, not as a cultural object, but as a conceptual work of art, which directly criticizes practices of cultural appropriation and commodification. Now we invite you to watch a wonderful PBS video about Nicholas Galanin living and creating work in Alaska. This is part of the series Craft in America.
I've seen more bears this year than I've seen in a long time. I saw mom and cubs back there last time, and a big male bear too. They're all waiting for the fish to run up the river.
I was born here in Sitka. Sitka is the Tlingit name, and the name now is Bearnoff. That name should change back. Our place names have importance, and they had use. And the renaming of them is all actively in line with that erasure of indigenous histories, indigenous presence, indigenous Land and language. We come from oral history. Our histories were shared orally and passed on, and they continually are still. All of my work deals with language, whether it's Tlingit language or the cultural language of our visual art. It's a very iconic, powerful, visual, abstract language that's distinct to our community, that's continually evolved and it continues to still today. Oftentimes, identity for Indigenous communities is frozen in the past. There's this idea of a time period of pre-contact, and that is responsible for heavily romanticizing this narrative of the vanishing Indian, or upholding us as peoples that are gone and not here. That's damaging.
An Indian petroglyph. I think this is like 10 years old, maybe? I was out here for days, just chipping at it.
There's these ideas of authenticity, culturally speaking. We are only authentic if we're visually fitting a bill, or our work is, or our material, or our process, or our tools. Colonization has worked extremely diligently and hard to keep us in containers and boxes, not just through containment on reservations and land, but through our objects and institutions, our histories, our language. Suhedi Shugak Titan in Tlingit translates to, "We will again open this container of wisdom that's been left in our care." That container of wisdom is our language, our dance, our music, our visual art, everything. And in a sovereign reclamation of power and space, that work is saying our work will look like this if it needs to. Our conversations will go here if they need to. We get to do whatever we want. We are allowed to imagine what form it can be without adhering to these ideas of romanticized perspective. I started in engraving and wood carving with my mentors, Wayne Price, Louis Menard, my father, and my uncle Will Burkhart. Nothing was more fulfilling for me than doing that work, and I was just eager to learn and try to understand what it means to be part of that continuum.
I'm Nick's cousin. Our fathers are brothers. Both of them are Tlingit artists. My father has done a lot. Big monumental work, big totems, several canoes as well. He's an accomplished engraver. Definitely one of the masters out there. I can remember being 5 years old and running around Totem Park where my father would carve. It's definitely in our family, in our blood.
This is a house post, so it's work in progress. It's just roughing it out right now. I'll carve this half and Lee will follow on the other half, and then we just move through like that. This is an historically relevant way of working and for an apprentice to learn. In my uncle's studio and my father's bench was always all the tools. The foundation of all the work comes down to understanding a tool, how to make a tool, how to maintain a tool. Tlita, nads. This is the trunk of a tree, the branch. This particular one is a pattern ad, so it flexes. See that slight little. My uncle made this 30 years ago. There's several different sizes of adses. Gutter ads, which is the big curve for really heavy work. No flex in this. Hook knives, curved, bent knife. It's a blade on both sides. You can do lots of detail work with it if needed. I did an Associate of Arts degree, and then from there went to London Guildhall University. Going to London, I brought a lot of excitement, but they said I could not use any of my cultural visual language in my work there. They said it was too literal. Oftentimes, we are asked to hang up our identity at the doors of these institutions. That's an extension of the damaging philosophy of kill the Indian, save the man. That is the idea and desire and process of forced assimilation, of removing every aspect of our being, every aspect of it. The food and subsistence and land, the language, the removal of children from indigenous families, placing them in boarding schools, all of that. It was essentially genocide and colonial violence against indigenous and brown and black bodies and nation building of the US hasn't really stopped. Later, going to Massey University in New Zealand to do my master's in visual art, I was able to engage in these conversations and this work and bring my cultural perspectives and identities, and that was where a lot of my work really started to take place and happen. This is forming metal, essentially, so chasing and repoussé. So you work it from both sides, front and back. And Glueckert culture, a lot of old pieces, you'll see copper shaped and formed in this process. I start off with a sheet of copper, shape it, and then start doing the detail work. So it's really slow work. Like months and months to finish a mask. Masks in our culture are significant and are used in different contexts, from ceremony to healing to storytelling. For Kill the Indian, Save the Man, I've worked with Indonesian-made tourist knockoff masks, and I carved them down to chips and then reassembled them as masks in a pile. That visual reference of having to shape ourselves so much that we can't see or make sense of ourselves is that jumble of chips in a new form of a mask. You'll see here in town even with our tourism, our culture being consumed, our objects being consumed so heavily that it's just the ideas of them without us. To strip that so far that we're removed from it, and all you have is this mimic, this misappropriation that's a peak colonial consumption.
Wow, Noma, your hair's so nice.
All my gang.
Oh, they look so nice.
Oh, dogs.
I was just gonna let him clean the baby's food up.
All right, yep. Nick and I met at a conference for Native performance art. Between us, we have 6 kids. one that's ours, that's a little 1-year-old, and then we've got older kids, each of us.
Are you helping? You watching to make sure we do it right?
This is
Sockeye.
sockeye. You can catch them on a fly and rod, but these are dip net.
Nick can catch a king salmon on the paddleboard, net it and club it by himself, and paddle back to the boat with like 3 huge, and these are like 20-pound fish. They're not little. So it's not a small thing to net that fish.
This is taking the bones out and cutting it down to size before we brine them. And then we'll dry them and glaze them.
And for this, we're gonna full smoke.
Okay, everybody have gloves?
All the kids are around a lot in everything that we do, and it's really important to us to include them in our work as much as we can.
Got it.
Nick and I are very involved in supporting each other and collaborating on work when we can. We work collaboratively, but we also support each other's work, and we have different strengths, each of us, too.
If we look at the process of salmon, skinning deer, picking berries, teaching our children the process of connection to place and land, all of these ways of surviving and being and caring and loving that got us here today, generationally through our ancestors, has and holds something that I would say is like a memory in our DNA. And that memory and that DNA surfaces in those processes and through joy, like a feeling of joy. You can't capture it in any other way but just let it pass through you.
Nothing? Yep, good.
The only way you can share that is through teaching your children. In these institutional spaces across the globe, the wealth of culture that they have has oftentimes been mined and removed from other communities. Almost all of these objects have been stolen. Almost all of them have certainly been created for context of cultural use and not of colonial imprisonment. They're objects of power that don't belong in these spaces. It's a blueprint, it's a plan, it's a map. The next step for this, once this is covered in this pigment, will be to paint the floor plan of the Anchorage Museum with notes on where our cultural objects are in those spaces. So it can almost be an escape route or a plan of removal. The idea that these objects wouldn't be here without those spaces is a major myth. We've cared for our culture and our objects and our community's knowledge and for 15,000 plus years, right? Our communities are fighting for many things, including the return of our objects, in some cases, return of our ancestors' bones. The real change isn't going to happen with our communities only being the ones that are responding and leading ways in these conversations. The real change has to come from the communities that are perpetuating it or the communities that are upholding it by remaining complicit in the system, in those institutions. And the work that I've been doing has always been about bringing light to some of these conversations. Dreamers, rise.
This one yet?
All in America, a simple man from a simple town. He has no plans. We've been working on this record for 2 years. It's going to be released with Sub Pop Records, which is such a legendary record label. Music you can explore like visual art endlessly. Being able to move freely is really a necessity for me. There can be a lot of discovery and uncertainty and power in sound. You have to remain open to what that might be. For me, the process, it's more about being receptive and then trusting those ideas when they come. I don't know what'll be next. I don't have an expectation of that, and that's liberating.
Let's take a closer look at Galanin's piece in this exhibition. I think it goes like this: gold. And as we watch the video, there are several ways for you to interact. If you have someone with you, you can turn to that person to reflect, to discuss, to respond, or to ask a question. You can even pause your video to do this. Write comments down on a piece of paper. Sketch or draw onto a piece of paper if you wish. This is a recorded segment, so you can watch it as many times as you'd like. So have your sketchbooks and a pencil ready. Before trying to interpret the meaning behind this piece, first ask yourself, what do I notice? What do I wonder? For indigenous peoples of the Pacific Northwest coast, such as Nicholas Galanin, the totem pole is a ceremonial object used to celebrate events, depict stories, and document family lineage or history. What might it mean to deconstruct, then reconstruct an object of value? How might these changes impact meaning or value? Contrary to our initial understanding of this piece, this work is not a sacred object, but a carving by an Indonesian artist created to sell as a souvenir to tourists in Alaska. Galanin has deconstructed it, and applied gold leaf. How does Galanin build a dialogue around cultural appropriation, value, and indigenous reclamation? In other words, how does he get the viewer to think about and talk about these cultural issues? Apply these ideas to your own life or identities. Has something that you value ever been destroyed or appropriated by others? If so, were reparations made or compensation? If not, what kinds of privilege may have protected you from this? What are the lenses that you view the world through? How might our lenses inform our reactions and our responses? Our time has unfortunately come to an end. However, if you press pause on the image in this video, you can continue to see Nicholas Galanin's artwork, and you can continue creating with your pencil and writing down your thoughts and ideas.
Thank you so much for joining us today. We hope you'll tune in for MAM's upcoming Art in the Moment on the first Monday of each month. This next one is on Monday, March 1st at 2 p.m. Please remember that the museum is open Tuesday through Saturday from 10 to 5, and you can come and view this exhibition in person. And the museum is free of charge, and we just ask that you have a mask on when you enter the museum. Thank you to Montana GEC at the University of Montana for sponsoring Art in the Moment, and for the continued support of Dementia Friendly Missoula and the Missoula Aging Services. This presentation is being recorded by Missoula Community Access Television, MCAT, as part of a media assistance grant donated to MAM by MCAT. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.